So, where does art education start? Like, many people are taught the basics, which is the techniques, the medias, such like that. Some get into the subject matter. But if art education is to continue and thrive in schools, where do we need to put our foundations? And if we put it in the media, and we put it in the techniques, that's not enough. I mean, essentially we're teaching students to make pretty pictures, and beyond that, what is the relevance? Sure, you can argue all the nuances of being able to arrange things nicely and make things aesthetically pleasing and the like. But ultimately, we need to make art relative for all of life and for everyday life, and to some extent show something measurable in which to grade. So the question becomes, if we're always dealing with artwork, yeah, we can check the boxes that they use the media and use the technique. That's very measurable. And that's why most art educationalists or art teachers focus on that matter so that they can show growth. But ultimately, if you're showing that yes, they use the media, or yes, they use the technique in a certain way, or some kind of combination thereof, or a reproduction of an image, there's a lot of variables, but ultimately that's the most measurable. So amongst those things, you're teaching history, you're teaching technique and media, reproduction. But it's when you deal with the actual aesthetics, the philosophy, the depth of what art is, that's when it becomes very nuanced. And people argue what is art, and so anything becomes art because it casts the right light. Yeah, it is an artwork. Somebody is thinking about something and putting it down on paper and causing people to reflect. More today, it's focused on criticisms of society, culture, and things like that. Things of the past, the hierarchies, the male dominance, the sexual. It's very social focused is what it comes down to, and it's all criticisms of society of today. So, point being is, it needs to be more than that. Art needs to be more than that to be relevant in schools, in life. I mean, ultimately, school's purpose is to prepare children to be independent. And schools today do not teach that, because in its own right, it is also trying to be it's teaching it's teaching dependence on things. So art or schooling in itself is dependent on grades, on measurability. But like I said before, life is more than what is just measurable. They're the gestalt, if you will, the anomalies, the not measurable. So when you're looking at that, you're looking at development. You know, that if you're really truly teaching kids to be independent, you need to teach development. You need to teach self-reflection, self-drive, self-organization, urgency, things like that. And when you're setting it up to be a step-by-step process with no variables, then the only variables that you have is the behavior of the children, the classroom management. But that's not preparing kids for the future. I mean, we're putting the the cart before the horse. We're trying to teach kids what to use, but not when and how to use it. So if you're looking at math, there is an order of operation, and that's where you mainly hear that term, order of operations, FOIL, things like that. And order of operation has so much greater implication, and art is probably, in my opinion, the best example of where that can be done. So no matter what you are doing in art, there is an order of operations. They might not all be the same. I mean, you can do a drawing and somebody might start with the background, or somebody might start with the subject matter, or somebody might, I don't know. There's a lot of different origin points, but the ultimate goal is to finish and to communicate. So if you're making an artwork, you need to be able to teach completion of thought. And there's a term I really like called inchoate. INCHOATE, inchoate. And essentially what it means is a thought that is not fully formed. It's a reflex. It's a first implication without any more depth. So with all these, when teaching order of operation in math per se, you follow a sequence that has been established. And so you're not understanding why you're doing this or how this is arrived at. You just know you need to do this. But in art, the inchoate thought cannot be left without development in order to make a work in its completion. So thinking about things in their fullest, letting them bloom and blossom, like allowing them to grow in a lot of different directions. So for example, I oftentimes use this technique known as the rhizome. A rhizome in its basic biological stance is it's basically a root, but this root can be transplanted and start growing more, so it can grow in a lot of different, it's always the same thing, but it's growing a lot of different ways. It can sprout different plants. So what this means in art is you basically make the bubble chart, or the food web, if you will. And so you start with this specific idea in the middle, and then you start asking, what does this mean? So you're branching out and you're breaking it down into all of its different parameters. And some of these parameters we can see as individuals, but other times we get stuck. Some kids refer to this as artist block. Like, I don't know in what other ways I can think about this. But that ultimately means that you need to research more. You need to research more, and you need to investigate the different ways this can be perceived. And that means possibly calling on other people to ask what they think, working collaboratively, going in a lot of different directions. But in order for any idea, drawing, painting, sculpture, print, whatever, to be made, you can always make the same thing, but every time you make it, you're going to make it a little bit different. You're going to think about it a little bit different, in a different way, because you've got more experience with it. You're taking that journey from a different perspective. Artworks are cross sections of your life. Like, here's this part of my life, but as soon as that part of my life is over, anytime I redo this, I'm going to have learned something. So you're compounding that idea and breeding it with other ideas and allowing it to grow. Recently I was reading Buckminster Fuller's Operating Manual for Spaceship Earth, which is a brilliant read. I recommend it to everybody. But ultimately he says that we are specializing too much. Like, when you specialize something and only do it to this one task, this one part, this one section, this industrialization, assembly line type education, where this is your part, then we move on to this part, not seeing it from its whole or for what its purpose is and its function. When it's only theory and not practice, it becomes numb, it becomes neutered, it's sterile. And so allowing kids to use art as a mentality of building, of continually progressing, to work on a question, a problem over and over again, developing it in a lot of different ways, becomes the purpose, the overwhelming concern of what art is. So art without a progress, without a process, is numb. It's inchoate. It's not allowing the thought to be fully formed. So teaching art in this manner, that you're helping unpack to develop the inchoate, is the purpose of art education, and should be the focus in order to help all other subject matters make sense. This is the roots of art education in the United States particularly, but the roots come from Froebel, Pestalozzi, and these great European and German thinkers. So why, other than keeping up with this space race, this need to beat Sputnik, need to make it to the moon first mentality that we've changed education into, and since not corrected and allowed education to be its fullest anymore. But there's a lot of research that I just explained, that there's everything that I've talked about needs to be unpackaged. Therefore, that's what this is going to be about. So this is part one of art education. Do more, do better.